Welcome in, everyone. I'm your host, Gabe Yoakum, and welcome to Tradecraft. On the podcast, I talk to people who are incredibly good at what they do, and together we take a deep dive into the distilled passion that makes successful people successful. Equal parts informative, interesting, and inspiring, I hope. We want you to walk away having learned something and feeling duly entertained. To that end, not all of us have an entrepreneurial... easy for me to say, an entrepreneurial gene. It takes a special kind of person to recognize and feed that itch to create, even when we are grown, partially mature adults. Eddie Raymond caught it in his early teens and has been stoking that fire ever since. Today on the show, we dive into Eddie's teenage years promoting hardcore shows in the wilds of Connecticut. We will explore his years at university and dig into Eddie's time planning events and how that led to Eddie's latest entrepreneurial triumph, strangers. In full disclosure, Eddie's a close personal friend and one hell of a guy, and that's why I thought it would be so much fun to chop it up. Eddie Raymond, welcome to Tradecraft. Thank you,
and thank you for having me. I'm excited that, one of the first episodes with you, my friend.
Yeah, no, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. It's a work in progress, so everybody bear with us. But I think familiarity breeds positivity, and I think it'll be a good show. As is usually the case, I generally like to start at the beginning. So talk to me about what led a 16-year-old to start promoting hardcore shows. At 16, I was eating Flaming Hot Cheetos and working at Steak and Shake.
So I think a lot of it came from, I've been playing in bands since I was about 14. And, it was a lot of it really came from the fact that like my bands weren't getting on the shows that we wanted to get on, mostly because we were young kids, we didn't have driver's license, and there wasn't a whole lot going on in our side of the state. It was kind of all towards the New Haven area. So it was kind of, one of those things if we book it, they will come. And eventually I was like, I can do this. I'm going to start emailing bands and email the venue. And the first show I booked was at 15.5, and I wasn't able to actually go to it. I got caught with a pot, and my mom. So, after that, it was kind of the same thing. Me and my friends, we had started other bands, and we wanted to get good shows for ourselves. And we said, screw it, we're going to do it ourselves. And that was kind of really it. And it just went on from there. And eventually I was like, I'm kind of good at this, and I have a knack for it. And there wasn't a lot of people doing it in my area. So it was a good way to kind of establish myself quickly.
Interesting. So, I mean, it's concert promotion born of necessity.
Yep.
Or at least tremendous want. And I think there's a lesson in that about passion. And that's a theme that's going to recur here on the show quite a bit. Can you pinpoint when the tipping point was when you looked at your friends, your buddies who are in the band, and went, wait a second, outside of just booking ourselves in shows, like, this is lucrative, we should do more of this?
I think I got it more so than my friends did. They wanted to just kind of keep it where it was them doing their own shows. But, I kind of saw the the money, which, turned out to be more losing money than anything. But, I saw there was a little bit of value there. And I was like, hey, I didn't have a job at the time, and it seemed like a quick way to make some extra kind of cash on the side. So I just started doing it on my own. And, I'm picking up bands from Rhode Island or bringing them to Connecticut for $50 in gas. But, they're at a $10 ticket. Like, you can pay them pretty easily and still have a good amount in your pocket. And I think it was one of those cases where I also wanted to do everything all at once. So I was like, oh, great. I'll manage bands, I'll book shows, I'll, handle photographers. And, most of that didn't work out, but the concert promotion really stuck around for, I guess it was the next 7 years.
Oh, see, I had no idea that you were doing it for so long. So this lasted all the way through college for you.
I think the last show I booked, I was 6 months into working at my job at Reed Exhibitions. Somebody had reached out to me, and I, for whatever reason, was like, yeah, I'll do one last hurrah. And it was just about as uninteresting as it could get at that point. Because at that point, I had such a foot out the door of that world that, I kind of half-assed it, which I feel bad about. But,
Well, I mean, we all grow up, right?
Exactly.
And that's a nice segue to talk a little bit about college and about um, what that was like for you. You know, I talk to a lot of people about this, and it can go either way. We've been friends for a long time, but we never really discussed what your college experience was like. Was there anything you found particularly inspiring about university life, or maybe the opposite?
It's funny because I feel like most of my university life really had nothing to do with actually being at school. Like, even down to the friends I had and the activities I had, nothing was really surrounding college. It was still like I was actually even more heavily involved in the music scene, and I was booking more shows at like more of an established level, and I was playing in bands more seriously, and the kind of everything just like elevated itself because I was a little more mature and had a better understanding of how to do this, and also I mentioned before that like the scene was kind of in New Haven when I was a teenager, and that continued as I went to college, which is where I went to college. I went to Southern in New Haven, so I was able to take take what I was already booked, like doing with booking shows, and bring it to that next level because I had more. There was a larger scene out here, and that's when I also started taking it really seriously and was bringing in some pretty great acts that have either now turned into larger national acts or were at that point national acts and have even gotten bigger. And I also I joined in with my friend's booking company, and we kind of grew that together. And he's still in the music industry, and he's even doing bigger things now. So it was really, college was kind of guided by my involvement in the music scene. I mean, to the point where I was putting so much effort into it that I stopped paying attention in college and actually failed out and had to write this whole essay about hardship and why I will do better and this and that, which, it was a lot of lying to get back in, but I didn't make the same mistake twice. I graduated. It took 5 years, but I did it.
So, talk to me about names. You talked about national acts and that sort of thing. At what when we started talking about it, you're like, yeah, I paid them $50 for gas, and they came and did the show, and then we split tickets. But when you're talking about national acts or acts that went on to become national acts, who are we talking about? Because that's not a $50 in gas situation, is it?
It's so in terms of bands that became national acts, it was bands around Connecticut or New England in general. I think in terms of hardcore, I probably one of the better examples is this band Vane, who had been booking them and their previous band for a while, and we grew a following for them within Connecticut, and we put them on bigger shows, and now they've toured all around the world. They were a Billboard charting hardcore band, which there are not many of those, and they've just continuously grown larger and larger. I think about other bands we've done. We did a show with this band called Citizen, who they're still around and doing okay, but the opening band was a band called Pine Grove, who has gotten exponentially larger than Citizen ever has. They're selling out 1,000-cap venues. They've done, they're getting coverage on NPR. They're another Billboard charting band. They're really leading this whole kind of indie country kind of emo phase deal that's been going on for the past few years. They were kind of a big inspiration for that. Gatecreeper was another band that comes to mind. They're a relatively larger metal band now, but I booked them to 50 people on a Wednesday in the back of a DIY venue that was also in the back of an industrial laundromat. And that's just how it went. Is that's where a lot of the shows we booked were just in really small venues with bands that needed a place to play on a Wednesday, and we gave them a little bit of gas, and they kept at it and grew a lot bigger.
See, I find something really fascinating about that aspect of this, and we're going to get into to some deeper, more philosophical stuff later on, but I think this is something to touch on here as well. You talk about booking these small, makeshift DIY venues. That's just almost 100% hustle, is it not? That's calling places and saying, hey, I know you have this space open. What I really want to do is this. I'll give you some money to do it. Is that something that you spearheaded? Was that some of your friends? Did you all kind of share that stuff equally? I find it fascinating because it's very cold call sales sort of stuff. And as you know, that's my background. So it's like, how do you convince somebody who owns an industrial laundromat to say, hey, I want 50 hardcore rock music fans to come here on a Saturday night along with a band, and I'll give you X amount of dollars to do it?
So the key is not letting them know what you're doing.
That is the most Eddie thing I've ever heard.
It's a mix of things. A lot of this stuff, it is a lot of hustle, and it is, there's been many venues where I've been to it once and they've never done a show again because they took the chance and they kind of realized what they brought in and they didn't like it because, how can you blame them? But it is a lot of cold calling. We used to book shows at the Polish American Center in New Britain, Connecticut, and we did that for years and years. And I think genuinely the reason why is because one of the people I booked shows with was a kid named Chris Zerba, which Zerba is a real Polish name, and I think they liked that about him, so they gave him the shot. And it, without exaggeration, we would have shows upstairs with hardcore bands and emo bands and stuff like that. And then downstairs they would have Polish polka nights where they're old Polish men are getting absolutely plastered drunk, coming up, paying us to come into because they're curious to see what's going on at our thing, paying us the cover, then walking in for 10 minutes and leaving. But we took their money and they didn't even care. But it is a lot of hustle, and venues are rarer and rarer to find. It's always been an issue with hardcore and metal and just DIY music in general. More and more venues are being bought up by larger companies that, they have LLCs. They can't take risks on, people moshing and stage diving and just kind of acting, reckless because they can get sued for it. At least there's the fear of them getting sued for it. There's a relatively decent understanding that in DIY, you know what you're signing yourself up for. So it doesn't happen as often as I think venues are afraid it will. But yeah, it was a constant grind. And, with the one in the back of the laundromat, that one only recently shut down, I think, but it got passed between so many different people, that ran it. I mean, even I was involved with running it at one point after college, and it was just kind of kept in the scene for a long time. And I think originally it started as just a recording space, and they pitched it to the landlords, hey, we're just going to be recording here. And then eventually they're like, oh, we can bring shows in. And then it was just kind of very hush hush. The only way you knew how to get there was a YouTube video that showed you a guide to walk through. You had to walk through 2 box trucks and then kind of slide into the back, and that's where you got in.
Oh, see, that's fascinating. I think that's a whole other podcast, but to dig deeply into that subgenre, that world it's
called Crunch House, by the way.
Crunch House. It sounds like a great place to have a bowl of cereal.
Yep.
Look, we could stay on this all day. Like I said, I want to keep moving forward a little bit here. Now, as I had alluded to earlier, Eddie and I are good friends. We've known each other almost 4 years, and that's a direct result of our time together at Reed Exhibitions and namely Reed Pop. We're going to go through a little bit of your journey there later in some detail. But what I want to talk to you about now is the end of college, where you ended up after college, and how you found yourself where you find yourself now.
So I started at Reed. I graduated on Saturday and I started Reed that Tuesday. And, the Monday was just because I had my last shift at my retail job. So there was really no in between. I didn't think I had the opportunity. My parents had always said it in my head that there was not an opportunity to sit still. So I had been applying for jobs like a lunatic prior to graduating, and Reed was really the first one to offer me a job. And